when you awaken from this, hypnotic state, you will have no past. All your past will be gone. And others, he elaborated their past and gave them an inflated past. Others, he took the future from them or inflated their future. And some, he even removed their present from them. And it was very interesting, the effects that these suggestions had on their personalities. The ones who had their history removed and their past removed projected orientations of lethargy, laziness, lack of drive, low motivation, sense of purposelessness and meaninglessness in their lives. You see, and the problem with sense of direction. You see, the ones who had their history inflated had, the opposite effect, in a sense. The increased ego, the increased pride, and the whole bit, and so forth. The ones, and I can't recall all of it now, who had an inflated future, sort of like going to heaven, experience, in a way, they experience a type of pacified state and a state of relative lack of anxiety, because they weren't worried because they had this great future that was coming on, so it's like many of our people, they don't deal with what's right in front of them or what's on the ground, because they got this great thing coming in the future time. And those who didn't have a future were caught up into immediate gratification, you see, and they were short-sighted, and they had no vision, and so forth. So you see what I'm getting at. You see, history is a time dimension. Culture is a time dimension. History and culture form a space-time grid, just as you have in algebra, coordinates, so that you can locate a point at different places, so many units from the x-axis, so many units from the y-axis, and you can place that person at that point at a particular location. When you remove a people's past, and when you remove their future, how do they know where they are and where they are going and where they came from? How can they be other than caught up in immediate gratification? That's all they have. How can they not be short-sighted and caught up with just their feelings, you see? And this is the kind of situation that has happened to African people. That's why I talked about we have to move beyond a curriculum of inclusion, because our history has been made discontinuous, you see? And therefore many of us don't know how we got from where we were to where we are. And therefore we can't relate ourselves to an axis of time and space, to the continent of Africa as a space, and to African history as a time, and therefore establish our location in the world and our identity in the world relative to everything else going on in the world. In giving up responsibility for ourselves, in placing our future in the hands of other people, in looking for other people to supply us with jobs, for other people to protect us against danger, for other people to feed us and to protect us and do all of this, we have literally ceded the future to them. And therefore many of us are caught within a narrow present that is caught up so much in immediate gratification, immediate concerns, until we are constantly rolled over by the future and constantly caught by surprise and are constantly unprepared to deal with the problems that confront us. Other people think in terms of 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road. You can't get our people to think in terms of 2 years down the road. You understand? And the writing of history and the writing about culture and the writing about many other things that are happening in the school is designed to create that mentality in us as a people. And it maintains that mentality in us as a people. A good deal of the violence that we're talking about here today is a result of the fact that our youngsters, along with many of us, are so caught up in the present, so caught up in immediate gratification, you see, that we don't have long-term goals and long-term commitments that stabilizes our behavior. You see, it's long-term goals and long-term commitments, a strong sense of purpose and destiny that you use psychologically to repress dangerous impulses and dangerous notions, and gets you to measure impulses and notions and desires against future goals, and get you to say, hey, I want to go to this party, or hey, I want to, do this and do that, but this is going to jeopardize something that's very important to me down the road, you see, and you put the thing in check. But when people don't have a future commitment, when they don't have long-term goals, when that culture hasn't given them a sense of purpose and destiny, they have no reason not to gratify an impulse. Why? I ain't doing nothing. Why not? I ain't got nothing to do. What's the point? I have no future. You hear some of the youngsters out here say that right now. I have no future. He ain't going nowhere. So why don't I indulge myself? What's the point? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. You see? And to a great extent, the schools, as well as everything else in this culture, perpetrates that kind of consciousness. This is the reason why, again, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about an African-centered education, an African-centered education looks at the psychohistory of black people, you understand, and how the historical experience of black people has created general modes and trends in thinking and behaving. You understand? That's what you look at, number one. And how it creates in us certain interests, certain desires that operate against our own long-term interests. This is why I tell people who are engaged in African-centered education, you must first develop a theory of learning. Why do we think the way we do as African people? How did we come to think the way we think? How do we come to behave the way we behave? In what way does this behavior benefit others and not ourselves? People, when they are made to live in a certain environment, to play certain roles in a society, come to have a mentality that reflects that experience. You understand? Am I getting through here? See, this is why when you bring yourself and your children into these Eurocentric institutions, the thought styles and the behavioral styles and everything are what? Out of sync. You see? They have designed a school in line with their experience, in line with their goals, in line with their history, you see, in line with their role as masters and controllers. And we come in and this look like walking into a foreign country. The whole mode of thinking, the language structure, the behavioral structure, sit down, be quiet, stop talking. We are very what? Sociocentric people. We come from an oral culture. And oral culture is a face-to-face culture where people transmit information more by face-to-face and by talking and so forth, you see. And of course, people who are held in concrete jobs and concrete positions tend to develop these kind of characteristics. So when they come into a school that's designed for people who are part of a literate culture, people who are used to communicating long distances and therefore must be very careful about how words are put together and must be very good at evoking the right images through words because the person isn't right there in front of them, you see. And they don't take for granted that the person understands them immediately and so forth. And you can see then why a lot of us have problems, you understand? An African-centered theory must understand this. This is why then when you look at the experience of our people, you look then at the fact that we have a certain kind of learning style, not because we're African, but because of our experience. Now you develop a theory of learning, a theory of behavior. See, that's the reason why I said earlier, you got to get rid of these labels, because see, these labels come from somewhere else. You got to develop a theory of time. How do you say you want your children to learn the same thing at the same point, it's in the same amount, and then you say they come from the project and they come from this place and that place, right? And they have all these emotional things to deal with, and yet they must learn everything the white child learns at the same unit of time. That's failure right there. If the school is appropriately designed, it will restructure school time, class time, a whole lot of other things to be appropriate to the people. Then you wouldn't have to talk about remedial education. You're talking about giving children the appropriate amount of time for them to solve problems. You see? And then after you develop your theory of learning, why we think and behave the way we do, what kind of thinking and behavior characteristics do we have, then you develop your pedagogical theory. How do you teach to this particular style? And how do you take your people from A to B? You see? And if your goal then is nation building, economic development, and the other kind of stuff, then you know where you want to go, what they must learn, what kind of characteristics must be developed. You know what is there. Now you develop a theory and a means of what? Moving them through the transition into the other side. And so that's the reason why I tell people then, if you talk about an African-centered education, you're talking about drastic changes, not only in the content of education, but in the whole mode and design of the educational process. That's why before you start designing curricula and these kind of things, you must first come to know who the hell you are and how you came to be what you are and how other people have operated to create us for their own interest, and how now we got to recreate ourselves in our own interest. I'm sorry for the lengthy answer, but you just provided me with an opportunity. With something I kind of wanted to get across, because I think it's very important.